Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora, welcome one and all. So good to have you here on a Wednesday from wherever you are around the world. I'm excited. We've got a small group today, and I like small groups. So that means lots of interaction amongst the team. So really want to see you pop in the chat and interact with us. So for now, I'd love you to pop into the chat. What is your name? What do you do in this world? And where are you from? Name, what do you do? And where are you from? Just a quick in the chat. Love to see you. Good to see you, Andy, Ray, and Cheska on camera. So good to be able to connect with human faces. If the others can also put your cameras on, that'd be great. If not, that's okay. But while you're doing that, humans are often limited by fear, which drives a real low-risk environment of comfort and complacency. You know, we tend to rather go after what we want or need. We tend to focus our attention on finessing what we already have. But it gets us in trouble. We play safe, we avoid the uncomfortable, and we stay in our comfort zone as an individual, but also when we're leading as a team. And how does that affect those around us? So we really want to look today about how can you deal with those difficult challenges, obstacles that are happening around the world or in your business or in your life. And I want you to think about how you can create a culture of courage, care, and connection. Thanks, Andy. Good to see you. Yes, GP and author. We've got Cheska, accounts manager from the Philippines. Awesome. For those just joining, love to pop in the chat your name, what you do, and where you're from. And so as I was saying there, we need both the courage and the heart of a lion when it comes to our culture and who we are as a leader. We cannot have courage on its own. We cannot have care on its own, and we cannot have connection on its own. But what we do know is that the heart and soul of all cultures is always what is that connection that brings us together. But we're focusing here on pride. And so I'm really curious, when you hear the word pride, what comes to mind first? And I want you to pop that in the chat. So what comes to mind first when you hear the word pride? Because it has a lot of meanings. Alignment with values. Okay, thanks, Andy. We've got two Andys in the room. We've got Andy Scott and Andy Lee. Ray, self-respect. Andy, self-respect. A job well done. Thanks, Angelique. Pride, confidence. Beautiful. So pride can mean a couple of different things. It can mean our pride. So what is our pride? And when it comes to our own pride, it is our belief in something that we have a level of something that we're doing really well, and it may be even better than someone else. And so that's important from an ego perspective and a self-worth perspective to have good pride. Like I have pride in my 14-month daughter and what she's able to achieve. You know, I'm really proud to speak about her and the ability that she's walking, and she might come up on the stand-up paddleboard with me. I also have pride in the fact that I've achieved something. You know, I've achieved 10 national titles. I'm proud of that, and that's okay. But sometimes pride can also, it also doesn't serve us. Pride can get in the way of us sometimes. So sometimes our pride, because we think we've done really well at something, will stop us from actually learning. And so we have to remove pride sometimes so we can be vulnerable enough so that we can be coachable and learn. But then there's another side of pride. There's a pride that is associated with the LGBTQI community, which when a lot of people hear about pride, it tends to focus their direction on that. And then there's another pride where we look at it from a lion's perspective. The pride is kind of like your tribe, your community, your team. In a company, it's your company. If it's a family, like if it's for me as a parent, it's my family. So how am I going to protect that pride? And so we're really going to look at protecting the pride from not only yourself, but also the team that you're working with here. We're not going to focus on the LGBTQI community pride. We're going to focus on what it is for you as a leader, an individual, and how that works in a team environment. And so as we go through this, I want you to think of it as a lion's heart mindset. And it'll be pretty tough because you might see a few lions behind me throughout the session, but we're going to create a culture of courage, care, and connection. And how do we bring those three beautiful components together so that we are able to protect that pride? So let's first of all look at what I feel are the kind of 4 top key areas of courage. So the first one here is character courage. And when we think about character courage, it's our courage to stand up, step forward, and hold your ground for the greater good. It's like your morals, your beliefs, and it's what you really, really stand for. So are you courageous when someone else might be challenging your values, or they might be leading in a different way, or they might be behaving in a certain way which doesn't quite sit well with you? Do you have a courage to stand up and step forward? So that's character courage. The second type of key courage that I feel is really important is discipline courage. Now, along the way, we can see tiny, shiny little objects. We can get distracted really, really easy by our phone, by our family, by another project we could do, or an email notification. But what is that discipline to stay really focused and strategic on what we're doing, and to make sure we can restrain ourselves from the distractions, maybe discomfort, or even opposition to what we're saying? So when is it important to have strong discipline courage? Now, we don't want it all the time, because if we're really strong in our courage and we stay focused in what we believe, we may not open ourselves up to other opportunities or different points of view. So use discipline courage wisely. The third one here, which I like in regards to courage, is our cognitive courage. And so cognitive courage is what's happening in the brain, our thoughts, our ideas. And do we have the courage to, first of all, to back our ideas? Because lots of people have different perspectives. Lots of people may see it from a different lens, but do you have that ability to stand up and back your thoughts, ideas, and beliefs? But cognitive courage is also the courage to change the way you're thinking based on new information, new research, maybe someone else's opinion. Do you have that cognitive flexibility when it comes to courage to be able to shift when you need to, but also hold strong when you may be challenged? And then the fourth and probably most important piece of courage that is really, really important in this day and age is our emotional courage. You know, our emotional courage is there when you need to separate your assumptions and biases to be open and feel deeply for others. You know, do you have that empathy and compassion for other people, and be able to show that so it gives people permission and psychological safety? So 4 areas of courage. I'd like you to pop into the chat now. Of those 4, which one do you feel like you need to work on the most? Character, discipline, cognitive, or emotional? Pop one of those in the chat. Which one do you feel like you need to focus on the most to improve? Andy, discipline. Jessica, discipline. These are great. Love to hear from everyone else. Picks, perhaps emotional. Angelique, discipline. Kieran, discipline. Andy, emotional. So we got a lot of discipline in here and a couple of emotional, which is really important. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. Really, really appreciate that. But as a leader, as a human, even as a team, we need to shift from a courage perspective, and we need to go beyond the comfort zone. Why do we need to go beyond the comfort zone? Because comfort, there's no growth in comfort, and also comfort leads to complacency. And as we know, complacency can kill. Well, not specifically kill, but complacency can stop us from growing, evolving, that curiosity. And so we need the courage to go beyond our comfort zones. And I want you to think about a belief of that no matter what, you'll be okay. So when you're pushing into that uncomfortable space, when you're being courageous, have that belief of no matter what, I'll be okay. And that will really, really serve you in regards to being more courageous, more resilient, etc. Now, from a courage perspective, you might hear people talking about being fearless. And yes, that's important to be fearless, but we also need to be open to learn. We need to have that intention of no matter what, you'll be okay, and realize that it's not life or death. But sometimes fear will come towards us. We're in situations as a leader or as a team, and fear will show up. And a lot of people try and avert it. They try and step back from it. They create an aversion and avoid it. But my encouragement to you is to acknowledge that the fear is there and start talking to it. And talk to it in a way that you're not yelling at it, but talk to that fear and go, hey, you know what? I know fear is here for a reason. I feel uncomfortable, but I'm in a good place. And so how can you use that opportunity to know fear is there because you're now in a growth zone to then go beyond? And so we're going to have to talk. We're going to have that inner voice that is going to play with us when we go into that uncomfortable zone, when we need to be courageous, but that's when we need to stand tall and strong and have conviction in our courage, whether that be discipline, whether that be our character, whether it be emotional, etc., or the cognitive side of things. So for other people, they want to be able to see someone who, when they're in a courageous zone, is strong in that space, being brave and strong, except maybe when we're more on that emotional side. And that's when we can be a bit more vulnerable. But still, people want certainty. The world loves certainty, and people like certainty. So even when you're in that courageous mindset zone, we need to show certainty. And one really, really good way to do this is to focus on this mindset, which I absolutely love. And this mindset here, which is calm on the outside and fearless on the inside. So that's where courage comes from. When we're working with teams and we want people around us to feel a level of certainty, some level of comfort, but you don't want over comfortness. Remember, you want them to be courageous as well, but you need to show calmness on the outside, but that deep fearless on the inside. Not feared, but fearless on the inside. So 3 ways that you can create a courageous mindset. So let's have a look at these. First one here, the ability to have uncomfortable conversations. And this is so important now, where we're finding that people tend to be maybe a little bit quiet. Maybe we're in remote learning situations. And a lot of people try to keep the peace. They feel that a good culture is where people are not challenged, where people are just keeping everyone happy. But I can tell you now that high-performing environments are not where people keep the peace. And very rarely is there actually harmony. So there needs to be a point where we have uncomfortable conversations, but we need to create that safety to do that. So how can you create a space where you feel the courage to be able to speak up when you're unsure, where you maybe are uncertain, or you have a different perspective? And so we need to have that mindset of, you know what, I can be courageous and have that uncomfortable conversation. Why is that so important? Because if we don't have the uncomfortable conversation, one, it's either going to fester in our mind. We start making meaning of it. And then we then form something bigger than it was. But that can also happen for the other person. And maybe the behavior or the issue that's facing may grow and evolve. So the quicker we can deal with those uncomfortable conversations, the better it is for ourselves and the other people around us. The second way that we can have a mindset is to challenge yourself to go beyond what you've done before. As I mentioned earlier, we as human beings love comfort. We love to sit in that space, but we need to challenge ourselves to go beyond. Now, that doesn't mean, like you saw in the picture earlier, where we have I'll go back to that picture, actually. I think it's a really good one. Let's look at this courage. We don't need to sit in this space. I mean, maybe you do, but this is Felix. And Felix is from Red Bull, and he jumped the biggest jump from outer space where he parachuted. It's an amazing documentary from Red Bull that you can see on Netflix. But he literally went higher than anyone had in the world. He was up with a hot air balloon and he jumped from outer space and landed. Now that takes massive courage because so many things can go wrong. So we don't need that level of courage, but I need you to challenge yourself to go beyond what you are capable of before. Go to a space that is new, that allows you to evolve, is really important. So that's how you can create that as another part of creating a courageous mindset. Number 3 here, change the way the game is played. And so quite often we're always trying to maybe go beyond what has already been, what we have done before, but it's already been done. How can you challenge yourself to think differently? Maybe like Uber. How did they think differently to change the way that we had public transport? Or you might even think of Canva, the way that people were able to access graphic design and collaborate with people. Or even Zoom. Zoom changed the way that we had conversations in business, so to speak. Or maybe even Skype did first, which then disrupted the whole airline industry. But how do we change the game to make things better, maybe improve something, maybe change ourselves? Doesn't mean you have to create Uber, but what can you do to maybe change the way that your role is done, or the way that you're delivering a system or process in your organization, or the way that your company is focusing on, maybe say you're a camera company, maybe rather than taking normal cameras, we can now take a digital photo. How are you going to change that game? What can you do in your life and what you do, or with your company or industry? So that is, I'll just bring that screen up so you've got those 3. So these are 3 ways that you can create a mindset of courage. And if you want, take a screenshot of that. Yep, Kodak was a great example. I actually met one of the board of directors of Kodak who presented the digital camera concept. And it was a split of, I think, like 7 and 6 against going digital. He then moved to Apple. He presented it there, and rest is history. So we've got courage, and it's great to be courageous, but we also need to have care for other people. And in my experiences as a leader, as a coach, as a parent, more than 50% of my role is to care. More than 50% of my role is to care. And so when we think about leadership and we're creating cultures, how can we create a space of care through thinking about having the heart of a lion? A lot of people think of lions as being this big, brave, courageous thing that is strong and stands its ground. But if you really look deep into a lion, they have amazing heart, and they really care and protect their pride. And they enable each of the different cubs and the different lions or lionesses inside that pride to feel safe, have permission, and feel supported. So how can you create that space where people have that heartfelt care from you to be able to be them full selves inside their organization? Now, how can we do that? We can do things like acknowledge growth, maybe even look at going beyond the professional and getting to know them more as a person or as a human being. Actively listen to and show compassion to instill belief in someone. Maybe it's standing up for them when their back is against the wall. What are some of those things you can do to show care as a leader? Maybe pop in the chat. What is one thing that you can think of that can help people feel safe, have permission, and feel supported in a team? Pop that in the chat. What is one thing that comes to mind for you? Ask their thoughts, open dialogue. Great, like these. Two very important ones. Open dialogue. Yep. Make sure you bring them into the conversation. So often in meetings, there's only a few people that speak, and we need to sometimes ask someone specifically by name for their opportunity to speak as well. Acknowledge their concerns, caring, great. Ray, frankness, love it. Being present, listening intently, Angelique, brilliant. I like to think of care as how can we help people feel seen, heard, and know that people care about what they do matters. Feel seen, heard, and know that people care about what you do matters. Really, really important. You've got to be able to show that care. And so how can we create a space with fear where people feel care is seen, heard, and what they do matters? Help them feel respected and challenged. Care doesn't make them feel comfortable all the time. We need to also challenge them to think differently. That shows care as well, but we need to do it in a really, in a manner that doesn't create a personal attack. And how do we hold them accountable? And the third part, think about how you can make them feel included, supported, and empowered. So a lot of the time we might feel like we're supporting someone, but we're actually disempowering them because we're supporting them too much and giving them too much and helping them too much. How can we empower them to actually go on and do their own thing? So feel free to grab a screenshot there. I like that pics. Empathy is so important in care. Actually, I'll just talk quickly about empathy. We have to be a little bit careful with empathy. We need to use it wisely. Okay, so empathy is where we can feel what someone else is feeling. Now, if you do that too much and you hold it too long, it will have a negative effect on your energy. It will drain you. People that are natural empaths will quite often feel quite drained because they're unable to separate the feelings from other people, and they hold on to them, and it holds them back. Those that are really good with empathy move into compassion. What is compassion? Compassion is empathy. So I feel I can understand you and feel what you're going through, but shift that quickly into how can I help you? So empathy, compassion is empathy plus helping someone. And so that ability to shift is really, really important, because empathy, we need to use wisely. Otherwise, it will drain us. And I know a lot of people who have empathy, it can really, like they love it, that they've got it, but it also can really strangle them sometimes just because they're holding on too much. But if we've got now courage and care, we must think about then how do we connect our teams and bring them together? And I want you to think about when it comes to how we can build a connection of our team, that we create a ecosystem, not an ecosystem. Now, one or two of you may have seen this before, but I'm going to take you through this because it's so, so important. And we need to shift from a competitive to a collaborative mindset. But how does that look? Let's take a look here. We first need to realize that ego's not the problem. Ego gets a bad rap, and it shouldn't, unless you don't control it and it moves into an egotistical environment. Now, ego and egotistical, two very different things. Ego is your self-worth. It is your level of importance and your significance in the world. We all need that. And sometimes we focus too much on the collective worth about everyone else and keeping the peace and creating harmony, rather than actually support who we are and having strength in that, and having that belief and that self-confidence. So we've got to be able to work on both ourselves, both our self-worth and our collective worth, and also those around you. So let's have a look at what the an ecosystem looks like versus an ego system. So if we look at the self-worth, as I just mentioned there, around the importance of importance and significance of someone, we need to boost that with people. But we need to manage it as well. When we look at collective worth, that is when we're looking after other people. Sometimes not so much to keep the peace. Sometimes we may need to compromise, and that's okay for the collective good. But if we focus And the ecosystem sits in the middle. So the ecosystem sits in the middle of self-worth and collective worth. We need both being lifted up together. If we focus on the self-worth only, we create an ego system. And we see this quite often when we try and bring a team of all-stars together, and it doesn't always work. And what happens is their egos get in the way and they're unable to collaborate well together. They get too competitive, for instance, and then they are not serving each other because their mindsets are singular focus rather than collectively focused. But if we focus too much on a collective worth, we end up with a weak system, because if we're focusing too much on harmony, we are then removing things like diversity. So harmony and diversity are completely opposite. So when we want more diverse environments, we can't actually have full harmony. We can have unity. Unity is important, but harmony is quite difficult. So be very careful of trying to drive too much harmony, because you'll then start to create a weak system where people are compromising, they are keeping the peace, so they're not openly expressing, and they're just trying to keep everyone happy in a way. So we need a mixture of both. We need to balance both the self-worth and collective worth of people. Now, if we get a situation where, for instance, we've got people who are too much in the ego may have gotten out of hand, you can ask them questions like, I liked how you worked with. So you're supporting the self. I liked how you worked with. So that's now the collaboration, now the collective worth. And then you can fill in the sentence. Another one could be, how does that person support how you achieve? So there's still a you in there, still a self-worth, but we're now bringing the collective in. And I'll pop these in the chat as well. Here's another one. What do you like about how this person contributed to? So these are really good questions to ask someone when their ego may have got out of hand. And so when we look at from a connection point of view, I always like to think of creating the happy place for the misfits of the world. So it's not harmony, it's unity, where they feel happy, where misfits get to be who they are, that diversity gets to happen, but not in a harmonious environment, more of a united environment where they feel connected together. They can have quite different opinions, that's fine, but we need to create that sense of belonging. So how do we do that? 3 key ways. So we want to make them feel like they belong, they feel safe working together, and they're respected for what they stand for. So a lot of the time we sit in the like, the belong, and safe to work together, but we forget to add the respected for what they stand for. And that's when you're able to build more of that self-worth. So today we talked about protecting the pride and how we can bring people together in a culture of courage, care, and connection. We need all 3 of those for that to work. So I want you to think about, as you go forward, how can you protect your pride so that they can have the courage to stand up and be who they are, to go beyond that comfort zone, to do something it hasn't done before, but with the care where they feel like they have the permission and the respect, and like they feel like they belong with that connection part of it, so they can be who they are and really contribute together as an ecosystem, not an ego system. Now, if you have liked what we've talked about today in regards to protecting the pride, then you can talk to our team, and Kendra will share something shortly around how we can either create a program for you around protecting the pride, or we can do one-on-one coaching with you, or we also have the keynote available for you around pride, how to create a culture of courage, care, and connection. So I want you to go away from here, look at how you can improve that environment for your people around you and protect the pride. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Kendall, who's going to wrap up today's session.